What happens to an army when the war ends, and they've lost? Imagine being one of the millions of German soldiers in 1945. You've survived the battlefield, but now face something more uncertain than death: surrender. What follows is a story of capture, survival, escape, and silence. This is Trivia Tales, and today, we uncover the hidden fate of German soldiers and officers after World War II. In May 1945, the guns fell silent across Europe. Nazi Germany had collapsed. But for over 11 million German soldiers, the war was far from over. As Allied forces surged into the heart of the Third Reich, millions of troops were captured, disarmed, and thrown into a world where they were no longer warriors, but prisoners of a world rebuilding itself. The Americans and British captured large numbers of German soldiers. In their custody, many were treated under the rules of the Geneva Convention. Camps were built across Europe, and even in the United States. German POWs were sent to farms in places like Iowa and Georgia, working in fields, repairing roads, and living under surprising conditions. Some described it as bizarrely peaceful. They had enough food. They wrote letters home. Some even played soccer. And when the war ended, a few decided to stay, building quiet new lives in the country they were once taught to hate. But things were very different in the East. Soviet forces, having lost millions to the Nazi invasion, showed little mercy. Around 3 million German soldiers were taken prisoner by the Red Army. They were shipped to harsh labor camps in Siberia, forced to rebuild cities and industries they had helped destroy. Hunger, cold, and disease swept through the camps. Nearly half of those captured by the Soviets would never return. Some were held not for months, but for a decade. The last prisoners weren't released until 1955, 10 years after the war had ended. As for officers, and especially members of the SS, their fates took even darker turns. The Nuremberg trials exposed the machinery of Nazi crimes. Men once feared across continents now stood in the dock, accused of crimes against humanity. Some were hanged. Others imprisoned for life. But thousands more simply disappeared, vanishing into the chaos of post-war Europe. Some used secret escape networks called ratlines to flee to South America. With false names and forged documents, they started over in Argentina, Brazil, and Chile. Even Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the final solution, lived quietly in Buenos Aires for years, until Israeli agents tracked him down and brought him to justice in 1960. Back in Germany, soldiers who returned found a country in ruins. Cities like Berlin, Dresden, and Cologne were bombed beyond recognition. Food was scarce. Families were broken. Many soldiers came home to empty houses, missing loved ones, or unrecognizable towns. They didn't return as heroes. They returned as broken men, haunted by what they had seen, and often by what they had done. In East Germany, former soldiers were distrusted. Many were imprisoned again, this time by their own government. In West Germany, former Wehrmacht soldiers were needed to rebuild the country, and even its military. With the Cold War heating up, NATO quietly allowed former officers to rejoin the new army. Some war criminals faded into civilian life, undetected. Others built careers in politics, business, or even education, never once asked about their past. But the line between guilt and survival wasn't always clear. For decades, German society tried to draw a distinction between the regular army, the Wehrmacht, and the SS. The myth of the clean Wehrmacht was born. The idea that ordinary German soldiers were just following orders, and only the SS committed atrocities. But over time, evidence emerged that shattered that illusion. Massacres in Eastern Europe, executions of civilians, and cooperation with the Holocaust weren't just the work of the SS. They involved regular soldiers too. Even today, the story remains complicated. Some German veterans were just 16 or 17 when they fought. Some never fired a shot. Others committed war crimes and never faced justice. Many lived with guilt. Others buried it. Some found peace. Many never did. Their stories ended in mines, farms, prisons, or quiet neighborhoods thousands of miles away from home. Their names were forgotten. Their pasts, rewritten, or erased. This is the other side of World War II, the part that began after the war ended. You've been watching Trivia Tales, where history hides in the details. If you found this story as haunting and fascinating as we did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves history's forgotten truths. Until next time, stay curious.